To me, the 4 Russo MCU movies are bar none the best MCU movies we have gotten up to this point, but one stands above the rest, and that is Avengers Infinity War. In this video, I would detail all of the reasons why I love Infinity War so much, and why it is my favorite MCU movie to date. Right off the bat, the opening scene is by far and away the best opening scene we have gotten in an MCU movie up to this point. We don't get the typical MCU music during the intro. Instead, we get this more ominous music and the Asgardian distress call, signaling right off the bat that things are off and going, that the stakes are high, that the tone is dark and bleak. We see the Asgardian ship decimated. We see Thor's beaten. We see Thanos himself making one of the best entrances a villain has ever made in a movie with a big speech.
I know what it's like to lose.
Incredible stuff. Great way to introduce your big villain for your big movie. Seems like all hope is lost. Thanos gets the Tesseract, and we get a great line from Loki, coming full circle from the first Avengers.
We have a Hulk.
Hulk comes storming in, ready to save the day, ready to kick Thanos' ass, and we're like, yes, let's go. But immediately we realize that's not going to happen in this movie. Thanos quickly turns the tide and destroys Hulk. We have never seen Hulk like this before. We thought he was basically invincible. He's so big and so strong, but this is the first time he has ever come up against a villain that is just as big as him, just as strong as him, but actually knows how to fight and is very skilled. What a great moment just after the speech to establish not only how smart and driven of a villain Thanos is, but also that he is incredibly physically capable by just annihilating in a fight our strongest hero and completely establishing that nothing is off the table for this movie. Heimdall gets killed right after he has one last heroic act of sending Hulk back to Earth. Loki gets killed in the opening scene of this movie. The villain from the first Avengers movie gets killed by the guy that sent him there. Things are serious, and this ain't messing around, further establishing the idea that this is not your grandpa's Avengers movie. This is not the typical heroes win, everything is hunky-dory. This villain is for real, and the stakes are really high. Hulk lands on Earth, warns Doctor Strange and Wong of Thanos, and we're off.
Thanos is coming. He's coming.
One of my absolute favorite things about this movie, and something that you will notice while watching it after the opening scene and on throughout the rest of the movie, is that they were somehow able to take all of these different characters from these different franchises and vastly different tones and bring them together in such a seamless way. This was something that I was very worried about going into this movie. How are they going to be able to take the Avengers and the Guardians and Doctor Strange and combine them all and make it satisfying and entertaining? And boy, did this movie find a way. I mean, you get some incredible character interactions throughout this movie. You get the stuff with Thor and the Guardians talking about,
He is not a dude. You're a dude. This is a man.
Stop massaging his muscles.
and they talk about all the people Thor had to kill, all of his family members, and then Quill trying to one-up him.
My father killed my mother, and then I had to kill my father.
Then you get the stuff with Tony and Doctor Strange, the clashing egos, and Doctor Strange telling Tony he's a douchebag.
Protecting your reality, douchebag.
They meet up with the Guardians, and Tony just being totally done with all of the Guardians' nonsense.
Kick names, take ass.
Yeah, that's right.
So frustrated. I mean, the facial expressions from Tony in some of those scenes are just phenomenal. Peter interacting with the Guardians. I mean, Peter Parker's talk with Peter Quill about Footloose.
Is it still the greatest movie in history?
It never was.
Just incredible stuff throughout the entire movie. And it also made for some great humor. I mean, for a movie that is so dark and so bleak and has such an impending sense of doom throughout the entire movie, it also manages to have some of the best humor in the entire MCU. And it comes naturally. It comes from the interactions of these characters, and it feels like this is exactly how the characters would act with each other. I mean, "Why is Gamora" is one of the best lines in the entire MCU, and also a forgotten line in that scene is when Drax is wrestling with Doctor Strange's cape. Left so hard at that line. It might probably the most underrated comedic line in the entire MCU, and that stuff is sprinkled in throughout the entire movie, and it never undercuts the drama or the tension or the stakes because it is so well placed, and the movie understands perfectly where to put these moments of humor to add some much needed levity to such a serious movie. One thing that people always seem to criticize this movie for is a lack of character development, and I call BS on that because it doesn't need it. We already know these characters. We have seen them get fleshed out and developed through all of these movies that they have been in over the years. We already know them well enough. We don't need further development in this movie. This is the culmination. This is the one where we bring all these characters together that we already know and care about, and we get this big payoff movie, and they earned that because they did such a good job introducing and building out these characters throughout the years. And this one instead gets to focus on its villain and the action scenes and bringing these characters together for some excellent interactions. But aside from that, it still does have some character development. Gamora probably gets the best development in this movie than she got in either of the first two Guardians movies. We learned a lot more about her relationship with Thanos, and I'll touch more on Thanos a little bit later, but their interactions were great. I mean, the part where Thanos decides to sit on the steps because Gamora said that she hated that chair, he genuinely cares about her, and that's another thing that I'll touch on a little bit later. But we see her as a kid, first meeting Thanos. Gamora gets some great stuff in this movie. She was fun in the first two Guardians, but definitely gets more fleshed out in this one, and ultimately leads to a very tragic conclusion to her character arc. Thor also gets an incredible amount of development, and people seem to argue that Thor is kind of like the main character of this movie. And even though there are so many different characters, that's kind of true because Thor is definitely at the center of it. He is the one who loses to Thanos early in the movie. He loses his friend, loses his brother, and is kind of on this revenge mission throughout the movie to where he really wants to get back to Thanos and redeem himself for their last interaction. The scene between him and Rocket is one of the better scenes in the entire MCU, and talk about development, this is the most vulnerable we've ever seen Rocket, the most willing he's ever been to actually have a conversation with someone. I mean, he doesn't really want to do it. He's like, oh, I've got to be the captain now. But he comforts Thor in his moment of need when Thor is being incredibly vulnerable and telling him about his past, and Rocket's asking him questions. And the fact that Chris Hemsworth is able to do this in front of a CGI character is just incredible, because obviously Rocket wasn't actually there when he was filming these scenes. So amazing acting from Chris Hemsworth, and gotta give credit to Bradley Cooper for the voice work for Rocket as well. One of the better scenes in the entire MCU, and it leads to a conclusion for Thor's arc that is very interesting in this movie that I will get to a bit later. Despite all of these great character interactions and great lines of dialogue and great moments of levity, the pacing never takes a hit. All of this stuff comes from the genuine interactions between the characters, talking about what happened with Thanos, what the plan is, how they can beat him, and given the situation that they are in. So none of this feels unnecessary or ancillary. It never tanks the pacing or slows it to a crawl or makes the movie drag at all. It all feels so natural given the situations that these characters are put in. This is probably the tightest MCU movie that we have gotten so far. I can't really think of any scenes that weren't necessary to it, either setting something up or some kind of payoff or some kind of important character interaction or action scene. All of it is so necessary, and you know exactly who's trying to do what and what the goal is. It's constantly moving forward from beginning to end. I want to talk about the action because this movie has some of the best action in the entire MCU, and yes, it is mostly CGI, but it is really good CGI. You talk about the fight between Thanos and Hulk in the beginning. It's a great hand-to-hand fight. You get the stuff on New York with Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian. Ebony Maw, by the way, is by far and away my favorite member of the Black Order. He had some really fun lines.
Your powers are great. You must be popular with children.
I wish we had gotten to see a little bit more of him. The fight between Wanda and Vision versus Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive, and then getting saved by Cap, Sam, and Natasha was pretty cool. And this is a scene that I will defend because a lot of people criticize this scene for having inconsistent power levels. I don't agree. First of all, Vision got stabbed right off the bat, who was completely weakened and basically useless throughout this entire fight, so Wanda has to protect him while also fighting off two different villains, opponents, who are very good at fighting against magic and have her outnumbered 2-1. Then the other three Avengers come in and save Wanda, and not only do they have the two villains outnumbered 3-2, they also catch them by surprise and are great strategists and hand-to-hand fighters, which is not something that these two characters seem to be amazing at. So they were caught off guard, outnumbered, and using a style that they weren't amazing at, which is fighting against regular humans hand-to-hand. So I understand the complaint about power levels with that scene, but it made perfect sense to me, and I have defended that and always will. The stuff on Titan is definitely the best action in the movie, particularly the fight between Thanos and Doctor Strange. Really cool visuals there. Doctor Strange turning the stuff into butterflies, which startles Thanos for a second, which is a really cool little moment. Lots of great little moments like that sprinkled throughout the movie. And then the bunch of Doctor Stranges and Thanos finding the real one. And then you get the fight between Thanos and Tony, which, aside from the throw in the moon stuff, which was really cool, this one isn't necessarily as much of a marvel to look at as the Doctor Strange fight, but the stakes are high, it's very intense, and you could feel Tony getting overwhelmed, fighting to his last breath, and almost dies in the process, only to be saved by Doctor Strange. Which brings me to my next point, which is that Thanos, throughout this entire movie, constantly forces our main characters to make very difficult decisions regarding the Infinity Stones. Oftentimes it is, will you give up the stone and save this person and risk the lives of trillions, or will you let this person die and not give up the stone to save those trillions? Now, on paper, of course, the correct answer would be to not give up the stone, because one person dying is a lot better than trillions. However, when you're in this situation and you see Thanos torturing and killing this person that you care about right in front of you, the natural instinct, the humane reaction would be to give up the stone to save this person's life right now, which most of the characters do in this movie. Loki gives up the Tesseract to save Thor's life. Gamora gives up the Soul Stone to save Nebula's life. Doctor Strange gives up the Time Stone to save Tony's life. But even the two characters that do end up making the correct decision, they still lose. Thanos still wins, and it was a false choice. Peter chooses to kill Gamora to prevent Thanos from getting the Soul Stone, which was the right decision, but Thanos wins anyway and makes Peter's gun shoot bubbles, respects him for it, but he still wins. Wanda made a false choice, killing Vision, which was incredibly difficult for her, and one of the most emotional scenes in the entire MCU. People say this movie is all spectacle. Bullshit, it's emotional as hell. Wanda finally being willing to kill Vision, getting it done, doing the right thing, which was incredibly hard to do, to prevent Thanos from getting the Mind Stone. Thanos just rewinds time anyway and gets the stone anyway. So despite the fact that he makes these characters make these difficult decisions, he still ends up winning no matter which decision they make, which I find very fascinating and a very interesting part of Thanos' character. Maybe he just likes testing these people and seeing what kind of person they are if they are willing to make the ultimate decision to do whatever it takes to get it done, which is exactly what he does. Thanos himself also has to make very difficult decisions. He doesn't only make other characters do it. He has to kill his own daughter for his cause that he fully believes in, a daughter that he truly loves, and that was proven by the fact that he got the Soul Stone when he killed her. That was incredibly difficult for him, and we know this because throughout the movie, they keep pushing this idea that Thanos is not just a mustache-twirling villain. He does care about his daughter, Gamora. And like I talked about with the scene where he sits on the stairs instead of the chair, where he offers her dinner, Thanos is not just this evil villain who is evil for the sake of evil, despite the fact that he is incredibly imposing and scary, and in the opening scene, definitely feels like one of the most threatening villains we have seen in the MCU. he is a very complex character with very complex motivations and a very tragic backstory. This is a guy who saw his home planet die off because people ran out of food and resources, despite the fact that he brought up the idea of killing off half of the population so that the other half could thrive. And that's why he believes that is the solution to everyone in the entire universe. That's why he believes that half of all life should be wiped out. That is as good of a motivation as any, and what makes his character so interesting. I mean, the conversation between him and Doctor Strange, you feel that when he's like,
It was. And it was beautiful.
so he feels that he wants to spare all of these other planets, all these other people in the universe from that same fate, and fully believes in this cause. Is his plan flawed? Of course it is, but that's what makes him a villain, because he fully believes that his solution is the best solution, and he is not willing to listen to any other character's perspective.
You don't know that!
I'm the only one who knows that. At least I'm the only one with the will to act on it.
So he's a complex villain, but is also definitely a villain who is incredibly threatening and imposing and definitely needs to be stopped, but also has motivations that are clear and understandable and ones that you can sympathize with. And that is what makes for such an interesting character and such an interesting villain. I also want to give a shout out to the man behind Thanos, which is Josh Brolin. His performance in the motion capture suit is incredible. One of the best achievements in motion capture of all time. I'd say right up there with Caesar from the new Planet of the Apes trilogy and Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. The way Brolin is able to portray emotion with this character is incredible, particularly in the scene with him and Gamora on Vormir, where he starts crying, which is one of the best scenes, one of the most emotional scenes, not just in this movie, but in the entire MCU, because Gamora doesn't believe that he actually loves her, and he proves that he does by throwing her over the cliff and acquiring the Soul Stone. It was incredibly difficult for him, and Brolin portrayed that perfectly. He is also excellent in the scene with Thor later in the movie, which I will touch on a little bit later. Because Thanos is such an imposing and powerful and determined villain, the movie has a constant sense of dread throughout the entire runtime, to where while we're watching it, we get this feeling in the pit of our stomach that things are not going to end well for our heroes. And we still feel like they will, because up until this point, every single Avengers movie, every single MCU movie, despite all of the odds, our heroes, the Avengers, always come through and win in the end. And we're just sitting here trying to figure out, how are they possibly going to be able to defeat Thanos? Because we believe in our heads that they're going to find a way, one way or another, but they don't. And that's what makes this ending so powerful. The movie was excellent up until this point. The character interactions were great. The opening scene was incredible. Thanos is one of the best villains we've ever seen. The respect for Tony Stark, the conversations between him and Gamora, him and Doctor Strange, the well-placed humor. This movie was doing everything right. The action was great. And I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about the Battle of Wakanda, which is, dare I say, one of the more underrated parts of the movie. Not because of the action itself. The action is fine. It's pretty much just a typical battle versus a CGI army that we've seen before, but because of all of the iconic moments, such as Cap and T'Challa, the leaders, running ahead of everyone else together, to Thor's arrival, which is a much-needed moment of triumph, the biggest fist pump moment in the movie, to Wanda saving the day, to the awesome female team-up battle, and of course, some of the most iconic lines in the movie.
Get this man a shield.
I am Groot!
I am Steve Rogers.
Bring me Thanos!
Why was she up there all this time?
But the ending is what makes this movie a shocking masterpiece. Thanos arrives on Wakanda in a scene that is straight out of a horror movie. I mean, he is like a Terminator in this scene, just cutting through the Avengers like butter. I mean, we feel that all hope is lost. Like, man, how the hell are they going to pull this off? They are totally screwed. They have no chance against him. Cap holds him off for like a couple seconds with everything that he's got, which just goes to show how brave Captain America is and how strong he is mentally and how he's willing to do anything to prevent this villain from achieving his goal. But Thanos is a little bit impressed, but also dispatches him like nothing. Wanda really impressed me in this scene because not only does she have to kill the person that she loves, or I guess the AI that she loves, which was incredibly difficult for her, she also has to do it while fighting off Thanos with 5 Infinity Stones, which was an incredible feat. I mean, this just teases a little bit how powerful Wanda actually is, the fact that she was able to do this. But Vision seemingly gets killed by Wanda. Like I said before, Thanos rewinds time and gets a stone anyway. The movie does this multiple times where it kind of tricks you into thinking that the Avengers might actually win, which is absolutely necessary for a movie like this that is so bleak and grim. It gives us these feelings of hope and takes us on this roller coaster of emotions. For example, earlier in the movie, Gamora seemingly kills Thanos. I mean, we knew that one wasn't real, but it is a great scene in and of itself and shows that Gamora, in some weird way, does actually care about Thanos. But then we get to the scene on Titan where they're about to get the glove off him, and man, we got him, but then Peter Quill, his emotions get the best of him, which we all hate him for that, but it's also a very human moment given what he had just found out. The scene in Wakanda where Wanda kills Vision and destroys the Mind Stone, and we have a sigh of relief. Whew, Thanos isn't getting all 6. He rewinds time, plucks the Mind Stone right out of Vision's head. Now he has all 6, and we're like, shit, we're screwed. It's over now. Thor comes in, attacks Thanos, throws his axe at him, and stabs him. We're like, yes, let's go. We got it. Thor beat him.
You should have gone for the head.
Such a simple line has so much meaning. I get chills just thinking about it. And had Thor gone for the head, which he easily could have done, all of this could have been prevented. This would have been over, but he decided to go for the chest so that Thanos could suffer, so that he could let Thanos know that he had defeated him, and because of that, Thanos snaps his fingers and half of all life is wiped. And as I alluded to before, Josh Brolin is incredible in this scene. I don't know if you've ever seen the behind the scenes, the filming of this scene, but all of the expressions on Thanos' face come from Josh Brolin. The shock when he gets stabbed, the satisfaction when he tells Thor that he should have gone for the head, the smile on his face when he snaps his fingers. All that is Brolin. It is so good. We get the scene with Thanos in the Soul Realm, which I think is one of the more underrated scenes, not just in this movie, but in the MCU as a whole. An incredibly haunting scene with haunting music from Alan Silvestri. I think the score overall in this movie is incredibly underrated. I know he gets a lot of credit for Endgame, which is fair because that score is really good, but the score in this movie is great too, and particularly in this scene, definitely enhances the scene and mixes very well with the tone. Thanos talks to young Gamora, and another scene that just further hammers home the idea that Thanos is not just this mustache-twirling evil guy, that he did this because he fully believes it was the right thing to do, and it wasn't easy for him. He had to kill Gamora. He achieved his goal, but according to him, his own words, it cost him everything.
What did it cost?
Everything.
We see half of these characters get snapped away, and I consider this to be one of the ballsiest endings, definitely in Marvel, in the MCU, but also just in any movie ever. I know a lot of people will say, well, we knew all these characters were coming back. I do not like that argument at all. To me, that's totally irrelevant for multiple reasons. First off, It's about the journey of these characters and seeing it through their eyes and how they react to the situation and how they regroup in the next movie. And it takes 5 years for them to do it. There were 5 years where half of all life was wiped out, and it took a lot to get these characters back. I mean, if you've seen Endgame, you know that they had to make incredible sacrifices to get these characters back. So it's about the journey of these characters and what they're willing to do to get them back and how they reacted to the situation. And this movie ends with all these characters dead, with Thanos winning. And despite the fact that Endgame does undo that, and a lot of people will say that, well, this is half a movie. It is definitely not. People only say that because the villain won. It is a very complete movie. It is about Thanos getting the Infinity Stones and wiping out half of all life, and he does that, which is incredibly shocking and heartbreaking. And people were crying in the theater. People's jaws were on the floor. My jaw was on the floor. This movie absolutely blew my mind, and I don't get that feeling very often watching a movie in the theater for the first time. Because if they didn't stick the landing, this still would have been a very good MCU movie. But the ending is absolutely what makes it as great as it is. And at that point, we didn't know where the hell this was going, how they were going to get these characters back, and what they would have to sacrifice to do it. And that is why it doesn't matter that we knew these characters were coming back. That's why the ending of this movie is so effective. So overall, to me, Avengers Infinity War is a modern masterpiece in filmmaking. It gets everything right that a blockbuster movie should. It's so tight, it is so well paced, it has great character interactions, very well timed humor, the action is awesome, gives us one of the best villains of all time, and has very high stakes that are established from the opening scene, and one of the craziest and darkest and ballsiest endings of all time. Avengers Infinity War is a 9 out of 10 for me. It is basically a perfect movie for what it is, and it is this generation's Empire Strikes Back. I will stand by that. So there you have it, guys. There are my full thoughts, my full analysis on Avengers Infinity War, why I love it so much, and why I think it is the best MCU movie that we have gotten to date, and why I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for any upcoming MCU movie to pass it up. As of the time I'm recording this, Thanos is still definitely the best MCU villain. It's possible he could get surpassed sometime soon, if you know what I'm saying. But as of right now, he's still undisputedly the best MCU villain, so had to get this video out while that was still the case. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Likes are super important, super helpful to growing my channel, putting my videos out to more people. So please, if you liked it, just do that. Just takes a second. And drop a comment. Do you love Avengers Infinity War as much as I do? Do you have some criticisms of it? Do you have certain things that you thought I forgot? Mention them down below, start a conversation. And if you enjoy my content in general and want to see more, subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a video. Stay tuned for more. I will see you soon.